Will, are you on the phone? Are you with us?
All right, I'm going to start. All right, welcome to the February 3rd, 2022 meeting of the City of Planning and Zoning Commission. I will start with reading the rules and procedures. The Plan and Zoning Commission is generally an advisory body to the City Council. The City Council will hold a public hearing and make the final decision on all matters before the Commission other than site plans and subdivision plats unless denials or conditional approvals thereof are appealed. Please contact the City Clerk or Development Services Department staff for details on council hearings. Applicants will be given 10 minutes to present to the public. Proponents and then opponents from the public are then allowed to speak in that order, with each speaker allowed a maximum of 5 minutes. Applicant is then allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal. The hearing will then be closed and the commission will discuss and vote on the issue. All comments are to be germane to the item under consideration and speakers are to maintain a courteous manner. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda will not be individually discussed and will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report unless there is an individual present or member of the commission that requests the item be removed from consent agenda and considered separately under the public hearing agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the January 20th, 2022 meeting?
Emily, I'll move.
Thank you. All in favor, raise your right hand. No abstentions, I don't think. All right, I will read through the consent agenda items.
Will, are you there? Will Page? Okay, I don't think he must have called in then. We can't hear him.
Okay, I will start with the consent public hearing items. Determination as to whether proposed amendments to Des Moines Municipal Code sections 135, a bunch of 135s relating to underground placement of utility transmission systems and related site plan design alternatives and site plan criteria relating to stormwater management as in conformance with Plan DSM. Is there anyone in the public that would like to have this pulled from consent tonight? Anyone on the commission? This item will be pulled from consent and heard in the public hearing. Item number 2 is a request from Lawmark LP represented by Jesse Bunny for vacation of a portion of the public right-of-way adjoining the property at 700 Locust Street and grant easement for this vacated portion of the roadway. Is there anyone in the public that would like to hear this item tonight? Anyone on the commission? Item 2 will remain on consent. Item 3 is a request from Eastgate Plaza LLC, represented by Norman Weinstein, for review and approval of a 7th amendment to the Eastgate Plaza PUD conceptual plan on 1534 East Euclid Ave, to allow development of a 7,500 square foot medical office building. Is there anyone in the public present that would like to hear this item tonight? Anyone on the commission? Item number 3 will remain on consent. Item 4 is a request from 205 Land Investments LLC, represented by Anthony Celsi, for the following regarding property at 1106 Army Post Road. Determination as to whether the requested rezoning is in conformance with the Plan DSM and rezone property from RX1 mixed use to MX1 mixed use to allow the sale of alcohol at the restaurant without a 75-foot separation requirement. Is there anyone in the public that would like to hear this item? Anyone on the commission? Number 4 will remain on consent. Item 5 is a request from Global Des Moines LLC, represented by Chris Swanson, for review and approval of a public hearing site plan global self-storage for type 2 design alternatives for property at 6101 Southeast 14th Street to waive requirement to underground existing overhead utility lines. Is there anyone in the public that would like to hear this item tonight? Anyone on the commission? Item number 5 will remain on consent. So the consent items tonight are 2 through 5. Do I have a motion to approve the consent items?
I'll move consent.
Thank you, Francis. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, and that's everyone. All right, we will move on to... Okay. If you were here for one of the consent items and it was just voted, you can leave. Thank you. Okay. All right, we'll move on to the public hearing items. Public hearing item number 1, I already read, so I will ask Jason and Bert to present this item.
Chair, members of the commission, Jason Van Essen with the city's planning staff. Item 1 is a couple amendments to the Chapter 135, which is our planning and design ordinance. The second one, which is the stormwater management, that is a cleanup. We'd actually had some amendments that were done a while back, have gone through the process, and while we were looking at the code to figure out how to move forward on the utility question, we recognized that there was a cleanup that needed to occur there, so that's what that is. The amendments to the overhead utility, this is, go ahead and leave it right there for right now. The amendments to the overhead utility question, this is something that we've been working on for some time. We've done a council workshop. I think everybody understands that Chapter 135 has a standard right now that, in short, requires utility burial with site plans, and the only avenue for relief of that currently is with the Planning and Zoning Commission, so all of those requests have to come here. Staff can't consider any of it administratively. In the report, we mentioned that we had last year 32 cases of those requests. 40% of those were on consent agenda, and about 3/4 of them were approved. So when you have a regulation that is frequently reviewed or considered and it's frequently approved, it's something that as staff, we believe, and the direction we've had too from council, is that we need to go back and look at that and make sure our processes are appropriate to what's coming before us so we can be efficient in our reviews of development proposals. So what we have done as staff is come up with a list of criteria. Maybe go ahead and flip to the last sheet. There we go. Of the code amendment. It might be easier if you go to the podium, and thank you. So we're proposing to add the ability for staff to waive the requirement. We think it's an important requirement to keep in the code, but there needs to be the ability for staff to waive it to save applicants from coming before you when the vast majority of the time, when we have a pretty clear pattern of criteria that the commission has used and a pretty clear pattern that when that criteria is hit, the requests have been approved. So if you want to go to the slide that has the code amendment, so it should be maybe 6, maybe, page 6 or 5. Keep going up. All right, there we are. Scroll up just a little bit more so I can see the beginning of the next page. All right, let's start right here. Sorry about that. Technology is great, but sometimes it's just challenging. So what we've done is you can see that we're proposing that the requirement be allowed to be waived if it meets the following criteria. So let's flip to page 4, please. Next page. First, it would be A, is it located in an underground district that's designated by a resolution by city council? And that's just a clarification. There is a subgroup, or the core of the downtown is a underground district. It's regulated and established by a different part of the city code. It's unrelated to, it impacts Chapter 135, but it is not anything that Chapter 135 has purview over. So that's the kind of, you think of the core of the west side and the core of the East Village. So we had to kind of put that off to the side, acknowledge that. Part B is where staff is looking at character of the area. You know, what's the surrounding area like? Are there a lot of utilities? Are there few? Is it a street state corridor? What kind of, how is the plan designated in either move DSM, or how's the corridor designated in move DSM or downtown, connect downtown plan? You know, is it in a residential setting? It's like the one, you know, like I think we had a hospice that is surrounded by houses where the commission waived it. You know, we just want to think about that character, exact same criteria and exact same things that the commission's discussed. And then if you can get through that character question, then you get to C, which is where we use the following things, which are budget threshold, that 10%. We've talked about that a lot in our meetings. You know, does it exceed 10% of the project budget, which we use the construction budget for that, and that's what we do with other triggers in Chapter 135, is rely on a construction budget versus a project budget that might have soft costs. And then 2 is, you know, we look at the magnitude of the utility. Is it a major transmission line? You know, how feasible is it to bury it? Then moving beyond that, the C3 there is, you know, we look at impacts to neighbors, which the item we had on the consent agenda, that was the driving factor of that one that was approved tonight, was the fact that if the applicant buried utilities, it would force neighbors to do work that they weren't planning on doing. And then last would be, are there physical constraints, you know, such as there's no place to locate a transformer based off of the way the site's laid out. And that's, if it complies with, you know, if we think it's appropriate for the character and it hits one of those 4 criteria, then staff will issue the type 1 design alternative and then and move forward. So happy to answer any questions.
Can you clarify your point around construction budget versus project budget? Where is that specifically called out in that C1 somewhere? And is that you just mentioned a designation between construction and project budget. Is that actually being used as a criteria? No, it just says
estimated budget. That's the practice we use currently with Chapter 135. For instance, the site plan trigger for, like, if you're doing a renovation on a building, if that renovation in and of itself exceeds 50% of the building value, then that triggers site plan compliance for the full site. Well, we rely on permit value, so our permitting system establishes a value. In most cases, that's what we will rely on. There are times when that's not going to apply, or there might be some challenges where we would also want to have the flexibility to look at other information, whether that's a bid from a contractor. I mean, we're not going to just take, like, somebody's, you know, like, oh, well, this is my budget. I mean, there's got to be some evidence behind it. But that's the intent. I know in that line, you're right, it doesn't specifically say project budget, but that's the intent of that based off of practice.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm fundamentally fine with the flexibility. That's why I was curious when you designated the 2 specific things, why, or if I was missing that. Second question, in 15C3, definition of negatively, what is the threshold magnitude? What does negatively mean? Like when we say, it's negatively, if you're like, I hate trenching.
What we've seen, I mean, kind of based off of, you know, what's come before the commission, that negative impact is either been a financial impact to the neighbor, or it's been a impact to their service. So Mid-Am has advised us that it's going to just, either the reconstruction is large enough of time frame that they're not going to have power for an extended period of time, which might impact their ability to stay open if they're a business, or it's, the quality of this. I think we've also heard from Mid-Am on a few cases where there's concern that the system won't be as reliable for the neighbors because of the crossover. It's a long story, but most of the time it's that financial negative impact, and then sometimes it's the delay of the construction period. Yeah, we'll still need to see if anybody in the public would like to speak on it.
Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak in favor of this item? Anyone against this item or neutral? Okay. So now we would open it for questions from commissioners, which we've already kind of started. Any further discussion or questions? All right. I'm going to close the public hearing and entertain some motions, if anyone has one.
I have a motion over here, and one of them, and I guess I can either, first I'm happy moving staff, but I want to make sure, the second motion is here, whether or not it's combined or not, and I'll explain what it is. I'll first state what the motion is I would like, and then I'll actually explain why. I won't keep you here all night, don't worry. So the motion is I would like to move that the chair form a P&Z subcommittee charged with the creation of an executive summary document that gathers input from city staff on what strategies are being pursued in order to achieve the objectives of Plan DSM. It succinctly summarizes development strategies being pursued by a city, and draft a letter to the city council requesting city council direct the city manager to 1, instruct staff to work with P&Z subcommittee in the development of the referenced executive summary document, allow the subcommittee to be responsible for initiating and overseeing research partnerships that evaluate the effectiveness of tools vital to any stated strategy, and C, require the subcommittee be responsible for hosting listening sessions where the public comment could be provided, summarized, and presented through a P&Z meeting. I'll explain why, and I can also send you that text so it's not, I saw the writing stop. So the reason this is important, I think I'm very, very excited this has come through because I think this provides us the ability to be consistent in how we make decisions. Awesome. It's very, very, very clear, seems like, reasonably thought through. As I'm looking at, though, while the Plan DSM comprehensive plan has multiple statements of visions, goals, and plans or policies, it does not highlight the strategic link between the plans or policies and the goals or visions that are intended to achieve. So our ability to evaluate the appropriateness of a plan, as is being requested here, and all these types of things that are doing, is fundamentally tethered to our ability to understand the strategy within which we expect the plan to move us closer to achieving the goals and visions. Again, incredibly happy with this one here. I think it's clear guidance, but what's being proposed makes me wonder that if we believe this guidance will allow us to meet the objectives of Plan DSM, what is the strategy we're pursuing to allow us to believe that there's a connection between the guidance and the reasonable expectation that the goals of the plan will be achieved? In the case of utilities, the need for consistent strategy as we evaluate the proposal seems highlighted by, I don't know if anyone else saw today's West Des Moines settlement announcement with their issue with Mediacom. So as we're looking at expanding access to our communities for broadband access, which the pandemic has identified across a lot of our city is absent, we know that Verizon is putting in lots and lots of fiber. We know that our approach to utility undergrounding, utility management, will be impacted by all these multiple other players. Right now, while we're focused on power, the focus on broadband, Verizon's network, and the reliability of Mediacom's investment struggles means we're going to be clear, we need to be clear in what strategies we're pursuing to thread all these needles at once in order for us to remain non-arbitrary, which is, our legal obligation. An alternative example of this need, the reason that I believe we need to make sure that as us, we understand what the city is attempting to pursue, what strategies they are as these proposals come through, is a result of, for example, there's a meeting on November 29th following up the Douglas Avenue Urban Review Plan. The Carpenter Review Plan exhibited some of the same challenges, which is that, we've never completed, in this regard, we've never completed, nor do we have sufficient time or resources to complete an evaluation of whether TIF produces a meaningful return on investment, which is very, very important here for utilities as well. We do not have an articulable development strategy for whether, when, or how we should deploy tools like TIF. And, it sounded like we really need direction from City Council through City Management for any type of a document to identify what our strategy is. Not saying we don't have any, just saying if we go say, hey, what is our strategy? Where's it on paper that we can understand what we're looking to do? It was clearly identified in that meeting that we don't have one. We don't have an articulation of that strategy. So, as we're looking at throwing TIF, utilities, urban farming, broadband, all these into the mix of appropriate land use and project planning, no request that that we can be seen as arbitrary requires us to understand what we are intending. What is the development department intending when we approve these projects, when we say this one's good, this one's bad? What are we trying to get at? I'm very conscious of the fact that burdening staff with another task in the face of limited time, budget, and community stability is not reasonable. While the current strategies guiding staff actions have not been summarized, and I know these will change on a semi-annual basis, in a lot of ways I'm confident these strategies exist and can be communicated if someone takes the time to do that. I'm hopeful we can be that source of that time to be able to reach out, understand what we're trying to achieve, and write it down in a way that we can all be consistent in what we're looking to achieve, and make sure that we can actually have a document that people can start to say, oh, I get it. When you approve this one, I get it. This falls in this region. When you're blending these two things, I get it. This is what we're looking to get after. So given how vital it is to understand the strategy behind the staff requests when P&Z members are attempting to evaluate the appropriateness of these proposals, this is why I would like to ask that, and if I'm understanding process correctly, my understanding is what we need to do is ask for here, I believe we can create the subcommittee, as if I'm understanding the direction correctly. We can here identify what that subcommittee would do, but then we have to actually ask City Council to direct staff to actually work with that subcommittee and to have City Council direct the opportunity to gain outside feedback. Is that correct? Because that was the basis of why the motion was structured as it was.
Yeah, I was going to look through the bylaws just to double check something, but I think what you said in concept is accurate, that staff resources really are directed by the manager and the City Council. So, typically, and I think we've talked about this in the past, or maybe it was from a meeting, but, the commission is generally like, when they had a request or want something to be looked at, send a communication to the council, like a letter that, we take what there's a motion, we want to send a communication, these are things we want to talk about, staff will kind of try to draft that into a form, and then we bring it back for you to vote on, and then the chair signs on behalf of the commission, and then that gets sent to the council. We've done that. That's been a kind of a routine. I don't have a problem with that. I do struggle a little bit, like you said, there's limited staff time, resources, a lot of priorities. So I'm trying to digest everything that you've said and what you're looking for, and like how would we accomplish that?
So your statement there is the source of this motion. We know there's a lot of priorities. We know there's limited time. I mean, Plan DSM is written by a dude in Florida, right? So I mean, like we know that there are things that we just don't have enough time or hours in the day to do. I'm saying we need to know what the strategy is. I think as people come here and actually ask to get their plan approved, when we say yay, nay, or what's happening or why, knowing what the strategy is we're looking to implement will help everyone understand how to more quickly get their project in the right direction.
So can I ask a question? Are you asking for a strategy? You want to know what the city's strategy is with regard to utilities, or is it a strategy with regard to Plan DSM?
We had a meeting on the 29th. I asked, for example, West Des Moines' use of TIF was very clearly articulated. It says West Des Moines' use of TIF is purely for infrastructure expansion. That is one of the two things that use of TIF is now identified as a good practice to do, right? So they have a clear strategy. No matter what they do, TIF is used for expansion of infrastructure. again, the MediaCom, issue right now is seen, that was, again, articulated there. It's probably an accurate strategy. I asked, what is our development strategy? What are we looking to achieve with TIF? I'm sure there must be one. There was no articulable strategy. That goes into other things. With this undergrounding, as we're changing this guidance, I don't disagree with this guidance. I guess the question is, what strategy are we implementing to the goal? And here you state what our theoretical goals are within Plan DSM. Plan DSM has plenty of goals, plenty of aspirations, plenty of plans, but how do we actually, what strategy are we going to implement to get that done? What pieces of public and private money are we going to actually pull together to do this? I mean, there is a linkage that we need to understand if we're saying, okay, I can't approve that because my strategy is X.
Right, so I guess what I'm asking or trying to narrow down is, are you asking for analysis on Plan DSM, like have we achieved these goals? How are we achieving these goals?
I'm asking for at least 3 to 5 of us to be able to sit together and say, we're going to write together a document that says the strategies the city development department is using to make its identifying how it's going to actually implement Plan DSM, how we're going to achieve that vision from we're going to hit these goals, these are the strategies we're using. We won't approve X if it's this type of amount because we think that this is going to have this effect.
But
an actual strategy document.
Specific to utilities in our review of the...
Specific to our development, to all of our development decisions. I mean, what is our strategy? In our meeting, I asked, what was that?
Well, I guess I struggle because I think that part of the strategy after Plan DSM was created was to develop a new zoning code and design the ordinance that tries to implement the goals out of Plan DSM. Right now, we're negotiating a contract with a consultant to redo a citywide historic preservation plan because that's one of the goals in Plan DSM. There's a goal in there that suggests we look at a variety of ways to expand housing options, including mentioning AHUs, and we're working on amending the code to expand where those are allowed. So I don't know that it's accurate, or maybe I'm mistaking what you're saying, but we are using Plan DSM as a basis to make decisions on how we allocate staff time and resources and the things that we adopt. So I guess I don't know that the other thing too that's out there that's on our work program is actually to reevaluate Plan DSM and see what have we achieved, what's not relevant anymore. So that's already on our work program to do that. I don't remember off the top of my head when we think we're going to be able to start doing that. I mean, we just lost a staff person that we're going to have to backfill, so that impacts our capacity. But I guess I'm a little bit lost as to what, are you asking for like a subcommittee of the commission that kind of creates its own things, or are you asking for staff support, or what do you?
When I asked for what is a document that identifies the strategies that we are implementing that are going to help us achieve those goals, because we don't have one. There isn't one published. Plan DSM, there's no strategies in the whole document. There's literally not a strategy section in the whole document. Like, what are the strategies we're going to implement? And getting from this is where I am now to where I want to get to, I should have a known strategy, and we know these strategies will constantly change. When the director of the development department was asked, what is our strategy for TIF? They said, we don't have one written down. We said, what's our strategies in general? We said, we don't have that document.
I think the conversation that I recall on TIF was that every project is unique and the individual decisions are made based off of that particular project. We're a little different than West Des Moines that just pretty much uses theirs exclusively for one thing.
Saying that we're going to...
That's still, I mean, I think we're cutting hairs. I mean, I think that's a strategy in of itself too, so.
A strategy to say that we're going to do one-offs 50 times a day is not a strategy.
Okay.
Linda's, sorry.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification for the commission, and I would like Jason to weigh in on this because he knows more than I do about this particular issue, but in December, Jason attended and presented at a city council workshop at which these elements were discussed, and so 90% of the ordinance that is in front of you was discussed in concept with the city council, and they've approved those concepts. They asked and directed Jason and the legal department to draft up those concepts in ordinance form. So I just wanted to make sure that the commission was aware of that yes, we have been directed to bring this back to council as quickly as possible, and that this was the direction that council gave us to draft the ordinance in form. Thank you.
If we believe we have articulable strategies, if we form a subcommittee, it should take 20 minutes to be done. Then we're done. And it's 3 to 5 people on this commission, get it done, and we're done. If we don't have them, it might be more work to tease out what they are, but if 3 to 5 of us want to put in extra time to actually do that, and I guess if none of us do, then I guess we'll just vote no. But if we do want to have a summary document that this is what the city's articulable strategies are, because I've looked up everywhere, I haven't seen a document that says these are the strategies we are employing to get us to the goals, and this is what's dictating our plans and what's dictating our work policy. I mean, saying, okay, we've got all these things on our list. Fine. How do we choose those things got on the list, and are they in line with the strategy we're taking to actually get to our goals? That would be very, very valuable for us to know, so we can understand when we're making a decision that we're doing something that's in line with what you have your greater, broader strategy of your goal is, or not. If it's there, sweet. This will take 20 minutes and we'll be done. If it isn't there, it may be something where it identifies this is something we probably should be looking at differently. When we're looking at the Carpenter Plan, what is our true strategy there? Was the Carpenter Plan truly just, we got a building at Drake, they want to get TIF as part of this development deal, and so we need to put in an urban design center? I mean, there must be a bigger strategy there. I just want to make sure we all know what it is.
Does anyone else on the commission have any thoughts? I just want to make sure we're giving equal time if other people have opinions.
I think we kind of did this when it came to sidewalks, right?
We had a subcommittee.
Last year, we created a subcommittee. Is it something that could possibly be done along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, the commission can have a subcommittee, I guess, and maybe I'm not following and others are, but I feel like parts of what have been said, Chris, in your motion are kind of abstract. So I don't 100% know what it is we're being asked for. So when the sidewalk issue was very specific and it was a singular problem and we knew that we could probably meet a few times and knock it out, when it's as big and as abstract as it seems to me, I don't know how long it's going to take and where it's going to lead, what resources it's going to, that's what gives me pause. But
And I have a question, and maybe it's more for Glenna, but do we have to make a motion to create a subcommittee, or can we just do that without, voting on this board?
Apologies, I don't know the answer to that question. I would have to look into that. I would say with the sidewalk subcommittee, I think it met once, possibly twice, and then the ultimate direction and ordinance that was presented was at the direction of the city manager rather than the subcommittee itself.
Does anyone else have any thoughts?
I don't understand the direct line between the motion and the agenda item.
You think maybe it's outside the scope? That's kind of why I was asking if we could create a subcommittee like without voting, because it does seem a bit outside the scope.
What is the motion?
I think there's either, whether they can be combined, awesome. My first motion was on this one to move staff. However, my second desired motion as a result of this is, and I can repeat the text, but the general gist is to form a subcommittee. They'll actually identify what our strategies are, and in that, write a letter to council that directs staff to work with a subcommittee.
so the bylaws allow the chair to create and appoint members to committees to investigate, discuss, and make recommendations to the commission.
Okay, so then we don't need to vote on that. So I think we can just vote, I think we can just move staff And then me and you, and we can discuss the subcommittee offline. Does that work?
That works for me. I just want to make sure, Jason, at one point though, as far as where does it go and how big does it get, I think the answer is we don't know, number one, because number two, it sounds like there's disagreement as to whether or not we have a strategy. When I say strategy, just to be clear, right? For example, if my goal, for example, is to say, I don't want my kids to keep asking me about cookies, right? My strategy is to make sure that cookies are not available in the house. And my task in that is to stop buying cookies and hopefully eat them all first so they're all gone. But the point is, there's a strategy in what I'm looking to achieve. Yes, there is going to be a lot of things we need to identify as a city. It's a big organization representing over 250,000 people. It is going to be a large thing, but we need to have it if we're going to stay consistent, because you only eat an elephant a bite at a time. So I think that there is an importance in understanding what the strategies are and ensuring my kids stop asking about cookies, extrapolate onto the city level.
Okay. Thank you.
So
sorry.
Chris, are you saying a strategy is how we're going to get there?
Yeah, for example, I mean, one of our goals, I hope, and obviously this is something that's above our pay grade, is that we would own the conduit that would allow us to deliver broadband everywhere. That's a goal, right? How do we get that? There's going to be a strategy for how we pay for that. There's going to be a strategy of, are we actually intending for that to be paid for on the backs of our citizens? Or are we intending for that to be paid for by the individuals who benefit from it? The strategy of how we believe we're going to get those dollars is going to weigh in heavily into what the tasks are to get there. So that middle part, that connection of this is my goal and aspiration to this is my daily tasking, must have a clearly articulable strategy, or we're never going to have consistent taskings, and we're going to get about 30 to 50 one-off things that we're running around trying to figure out, when if we said instead, you know what, that's going to put cookies in the house, so I'm done with it. Oh, that doesn't. We can look into it. Fine. If I have that strategy, I can actually now allow us to be more effective, more consistent in a reduced time manner, if I know very clearly what is the strategy I'm looking to achieve to get me to my goal.
If you're interested in being on that subcommittee, just talk to me and I will get something together. But we do have a motion on the floor. So it's to move staff. All in favor, raise your right hand. All right. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 6. Request from MDM Equity, represented by Tyler Price, review and approval of public site hearing plan, 505 East Grand for a denied type 2 and property located at 505 East Grand to allow rock mulch within the street tree rock beds where rock is prohibited.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the Commission. Sriharshi Chakraborty with planning staff. The item before you is a public hearing site plan, and the applicant is requesting approval of an administratively denied type 1 design alternative to maintain street tree planter beds with tap rock mulch rather than organic mulch. The property is located at 505 East Grand Avenue. So here's a map. As I mentioned, the property is located at the intersection of East Grand and East 5th Street in the East Village area. The property contains a 2-story building and surface parking lot. The adjacent uses in the vicinity are mostly retail, restaurant, bars, offices, and so on. And I have a site plan here that I can show you. As you can see here, there are 8 planter beds adjacent to the building, and the request is to allow tap rock mulch in these planter beds rather than organic mulch. Here's 4 along East Grand, and then another 4 along East Fifth. Staff is recommending denial of this design alternative, and I'll go over some of the reasons. Just some pictures, and you can kind of see the planter beds right here. So some of the reasons why staff is recommending denial is the section 135-7.3.1B of the Planning and Design Ordinance requires that all areas of planting beds that are not covered by plants shall be maintained with non-living permeable materials such as mulch and not including rock. City forestry staff has also advised that rock mulch would not provide a permeable surface and would limit water to the tree well, restricting growth and impacting the health of the street trees. Traffic and Transportation Department at the city has also expressed concerns in terms of safety. Rock is a safety hazard for bicyclists, motorists, as well as pedestrians. Can cause weaving and crashes if they get out on the street, could be a tripping hazard as well. Tap rock mulch would also not be in character with the surrounding neighborhood area. And we believe that the street tree planter beds should be maintained with organic mulch rather than rock in order to promote the growth and health of a sustainable tree canopy and provide for a safe neighborhood in that area. So that's a summary of reasons why staff is recommending denial. And with that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them at this time.
Thank you. If there are no questions, I'll ask the applicant to come up and present. You have 10 minutes. Please state your name and address.
Hello, Tyler Price, 5000 Westtown Parkway, West Des Moines. I'm with Knapp Properties, and I'm representing MDM Equity 2012 LLC, who is the owner of the 505 East Grand property. We're requesting the Planning and Zoning Commission would accept our proposed site plan change to allow the use of trap rock in the planter beds along East Grand and East 5th Street for the property located at 505 East Grand Avenue. The 505 East Grand Avenue location contains approximately 8 planter beds in the sidewalks next to the street. Historically, including in 2021, we filled the planter beds with new rock organic mulch each spring. The concern with the mulch is that based upon the topography of the site, the first decent rain we receive causes the mulch to float out of the beds, down the sidewalks, and into the streets. Once the mulch washes away, it creates a significant safety concern with an open planter bed and severe drop from the sidewalk into the planter bed, an eyesore to the neighborhood, and ultimately, we presume most of the mulch enters the stormwater system when it floats away. Based upon noticing other properties with rock in the planter beds along the sidewalks in the downtown area, a decision was made to install trap rock in the planter beds of the location this past fall of 2021 to solve the concerns noted above. We did not realize or think this was considered a site improvement that would require city approval until we received an email from the city forester. We had no malintent in adding the rock. Our intent was to eliminate the safety concern for the sidewalk users and the liability exposure from the property owner. Once we received the notice, we reviewed the landscape plan that we had on file, and it doesn't call out a specific mulch in the planter beds. We understand the opinions and concerns of the city for the survivability of the trees in the planter beds and the potential of the rock being spilled into the pedestrian walkways. But conversely, many of the same concerns can be said about the fiber mulch. We've been installing fiber mulch annually in the beds and have found it to be a safety hazard. When the mulch floats out of the beds, we are left with an empty planter bed that greatly increases trip hazards. In addition, the mulch that is washed out of the beds creates concern when it's all over the sidewalks. Also, we chose trap rock over other rock types, which I brought a baggie of the trap rock that I don't know if we can pass it around or not if you're not familiar with trap rock. Because it's aesthetically pleasing and will stay in place better than fiber mulch and other rock options. Trap rock is more expensive than other rock options, but stays in better place and with less chance of the rock running out of the beds. than other rocks such as river rock. Although we do agree with the city forester's comments about the fiber mulch being better than rock for the trees, we've respectively asked the question, how much does it really impact the survivability of the trees? Regardless of what kind of mulch is in these beds, if we're all honest with ourselves based upon the subsoil conditions and the reality of urban trees, these trees aren't going to get to their lifespan of 40, 50 years. And we also would make note that regardless of the mulch structure in these beds, it's the landlord's responsibility or the owner of the building's responsibility to replace these trees in the event they do die. A few other comments we had after reviewing the city staff comments. One of these comments is that rock mulch doesn't allow a permeable surface and limits water to the trees. Again, I don't see how we don't necessarily agree with that assertion. The rock is very permeable. I don't see where there's going to be water issues getting to the trees to be taken into consideration. Then also the comments regarding the rock safety of the motorcyclists and bicycles. This can be said the same for the mulch as well. The mulch gets out, and that can also create, fiber mulch I should say, can also create a safety hazard. And again, if we hand this out, same with the use of vandalizing. This is a bag. If somebody comes and puts this in a bag, yes, I would agree that I can throw this through the window with relative ease. But if you take this and put this in your hand and you throw this, I find you'd have to throw it really, really hard to create any sort of damage. And then the last thing here, the comment about it not being in character with the surrounding neighborhood and the area. There's other buildings, including our building, that has trap rock there. So this area here in between these two buildings, this is all trap rock. And I'm aware of other properties in the East Village that also have trap rock, so it does fit within the surrounding neighborhood. And then also, we don't believe that this is adversely affecting the general welfare of the public. Those are my other comments.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of this item? Seeing none, is there anyone who is opposed to this item? Please come forward. You have 5 minutes. State your name and address and sign in on the form.
Thank you. My name's Skip Moore. I live at 3822 East 28th Street. And for those of you that don't know me, I worked for the city of Des Moines for 35 years, all of it in forestry. The last 12 as the municipal arborist. My real concern on this was quite a while back, Janice Ruan asked then City Manager Eric Anderson to establish a beautification standards for the city of Des Moines, which we didn't have. So Eric called this committee together, and I was pulled in as the tree expert at the time. And we were all handed a copy of the Chicago beautification standards. Go home, take a look at them, and we'll get back together in about 2 weeks. Well, when we got back together, we all agreed we could just scratch over Chicago and put Des Moines in every one of them. But to go from here with nothing to here with probably the top standards in the United States, we'd die a slow death. There's no way the council or anybody else would have accepted it. So we went through their standards line by line to see what we could do. And when it came to the tree pits downtown, and we had representatives of every department in the city of Des Moines, including police department. When we came to the tree pits downtown, of course, it came to what do we do with the turf around. And we went through that line by line. Well, I'll be the first one to admit I've seen some really neat things done with rocks around trees. But when I was talking to Preston Cole, the city forester in Milwaukee, excuse me, we got to that section, he says, don't do rocks. Well, why is that? People pick them up, turn them into missiles. So we went through all this, and I'll admit some of the stuff that this gentleman was saying is true. The organic mulch will translocate heavy rains and stuff. It's a problem. But I never thought I'd see it, but during the BLM protests downtown, You all saw it on TV. They were throwing rocks through windows down there, especially at that tire shop. Where they came from, I'm not quite sure. I didn't go down and look around, but it kind of surprised me. I don't know if they brought them with themselves or whatever. But I would just definitely encourage you to support the denial of the rock around them. And I will say this, when we established that committee, the average life of a municipal tree in a downtown setting was about 15 years. By the time I retired, we had trees that were 20 years old down there, and they're even older than that now. When you look at these tree pits and you build them right, they make a lot better environment for trees than what it used to be. It's not a very good environment to start with, but that's my feeling on this. And from a safety, I've seen some really cool things done with rocks, but it's meant for yards, cemeteries, but not playgrounds and street trees. If you have any questions, I'd feel free to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Skip. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak against this item or neutral? All right. If the applicant wants to come up and speak, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you. I just want to, I guess, make comments on 2 of Mr. Moore's comments. His comment about picking up the rocks and using them as a missile. Again, if you look at the rock, this particular type of rock would be very hard to create any real form of damage. Traversely, or not traversely, but secondly, also, there is rock in the East Village. Again, we have it at our building in other locations. If you spend time in the East Village, there is other properties with rock in their buildings. I manage another building in the East Village that also has trap rock as part of its landscaping, so rock is in the East Village. Adding this amount of trap rock, I don't believe, is going to create a much more of a safety concern than the additional rock that's already in the space. And I do appreciate his comment on the survivability of the trees. Again, I've asked that question before, and I've never been given an answer. And I don't want to downplay 15 versus 20 years, but you're still not getting to that full lifespan of a tree in that 15 versus 20. And also that's an average. So let's say we have 8 trees down there, and 5 of them make it to 20. 2 of them make it to 13, and 1 makes it to 17. Or, you're talking about a ballpark average, 15 to 20 years. In our opinion, that's an average. You're pretty close in the lifespan. You're not talking about going from 15 years to 40 years to where you're really going to see that, true bloom of a tree and the true canopy of a tree, creating that shade that is the true intention of why we want to have trees in the urban environment. So those are my only comments.
Can I ask one clarification? Just to make sure, basically to break a glass window, we're talking about like 20,000 PSI. Is there any reason to believe that isn't true, number 1? And number 2, with a 2-ounce rock, I think it's pretty highly unlikely BLM was throwing these and breaking windows. Is that probably fair?
You probably have a better idea on the PSI than I do personally, but I would be shocked if someone was throwing a handful of trap rock and could break a window.
Probability of trap rock breaking a window is pretty much impossible. It's probably your assessment as well?
Yeah, I think it'd be pretty high.
Okay.
You'd have to be a major league pitcher, I think, to be able to get it through a window. So.
They can't do it either.
Okay.
I also have a question for you. Based on the wording of the ordinance, it doesn't sound like mulch is the only option. So you can also have some plants or other non-living permeable materials. Did you consider any other alternatives before the rock?
No, we didn't, I guess is the short answer. And I think that, you're talking about ground coverage at that point, which I don't think the survivability of that is candidly realistic in that type of an environment.
I have a question. What other buildings in the East Village have rock? I live down there and I haven't seen it.
Okay.
Right in front of Ray Gun, sort of private
Yeah.
I think the streetscape should be uniform and it would be.
Yeah, so I do know that if you go right across the street from us, I don't know if there's a Lion Lounge, they have River Rock. And then also, you were talking about some of the landscaping beds as well, so 300 East Locust also has rock. If you walk around, it's one of those things that self-included, and I think that most of us don't, spend our time looking down and what do I, what type of landscaping material am I looking at until you have an issue like this that comes up that you have to address it or think about it. But if you walk around East Village, you'll see quite a bit of rock.
I don't think that's accurate. I live there and walking around all the time, I don't even think of the Reagan building has rock. And that's not along the streetscape, that's not what the planters are.
Correct, I agree with you, but we're talking about the planters in this case, yeah. But there is rock in the East Village, is an accurate statement.
All right, anyone else? Thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing and ask if anyone has any thoughts or a motion.
I move staff.
All right. Any further discussion? We've got a motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. All opposed, raise your right hand.
Can I abstain for potential conflict appearance?
Okay. All right, thank you. And are there any committee or directors reports?
Nope, I don't have anything to report at this time.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Happy birthday, Emily.